right. Well, welcome chemists and physicists. We're going to talk about biblical integration into science, something that's been to my heart, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I've divided this talk up into 3 steps: situational analysis, instructional, scaffolding, and then methods. And I expect your input. What I'll do is I'll introduce the topic, and then you can discuss the situation or the instructional scaffolding or the methods of how you do it. So we'll have 3 areas there that I would like your feedback. A statement that I have made in the past is general biology, as opposed to chemistry and physics, has more religion involved in it. Why is that? What do we talk about in biology?
Why?
And origins. Whenever you talk about origins, you've got the worldview and you've got God's view. So I say that biology currently as taught is about 35% religion. Now the way I came up with that, I didn't go through the biology textbook and highlight everything that was religious statement. I took it from the AP biology exam. They said 35% of the AP exam, it used to be 15% was about evolution, now it's 35. So you're going to get that perspective strongly when you take that exam. All right, reason number 3. Actually, there are 6 reasons there that Barna has pointed out as to why young people leave the church. That statistic has ranged over the last 10 to 15 years from 65 to 75%, even as high as 80% in some of his surveys. Young people are leaving. This corresponds to a recent crisis, if you would read the theological journals that pastors read. Not that I do, and that's a good habit to get into. But if you do, you'll find out they're talking about the millennial crisis. You've probably heard about it too. Millennials not attending church or seeking some other alternative. Item number 3 here on Barna's, it's on his website, of the 6 reasons why young people leave the church, is the church and science. And when you read through that, I want you to realize that this isn't new. I left the church in 1963 because evolution proved the Bible wrong. So I left the church in 63. So where did this start? It started with the grandparents. That's where my generation is. The grandparents, not the parents, but the grandparents. We have been leaving the church because of evolution ever since 1963, and probably even before that. And the reason why I left is because, as I said, the church was irrelevant. Science has shown that the Bible is a myth. Or maybe you could say it was an allegory. You could say that God just wanted to give us an idea that he created and they wrote it down as best they understood. All these excuses, okay, you still hear them today. But that's where I was at, walking away from the church. I walked away from it until somebody, when I was in graduate school, toward the end of my graduate career, came up to me and said, "What is one thing you know about evolution to be true?" He happened to be doing a PhD in chemistry. So my bane has been chemist for a long time. I called him a Neanderthal. Anyone who doesn't believe in evolution of man is still back there in the Stone Age, a Neanderthal. But he persisted. He said, "What is one thing about evolution you know to be true?" So I spouted off the things that we think are true, part of the paradigm. But he came back at me and kept saying, "No, scientifically, what do you know to be true?" And that's when I started my journey away from evolution to biblical creationism and to where I am today. So I came from the hostile world that a lot of people are in right now. Positional truth number 1. What is biblical worldview and science. God has given us the answer right there. Let's look at it. For the wrath of God. What is the wrath of God? When you hear that, what comes to mind? Wrath. Come on, scientists, you can say it. Let me take an extreme. Is God happy? No, God is not happy. What is wrath? Well, this whole section tells us at the end what wrath is. Not this part of Scripture, but the rest of 18 through 32 of Romans 1 does tell us what wrath is. And I'll mention that in just a minute. But his wrath is being revealed from heaven. Okay, there's a key point, being revealed. So God's wrath is being revealed. And there's another word there that I've put in bold, suppress the truth. What truth are they suppressing? In bold again, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what he has made. What God is saying here is, through the Holy Scriptures, is that his divine power, his attributes, can be seen in what he has made. There is our mission, right there, for integrating science with Scripture. Everything we teach should point back to God's eternal power and divine nature. That's been my mission in biology, is to be able to do that. And I use examples from chemistry, and I use examples from physics to do that. As a matter of fact, I've already used them, so we'll be into biology next. All right, so instructional scaffolding. Any comments before we get to that, about that Scripture and what it means to integrate Scripture into science? By the way, if we just add Scriptures to some scientific process, we haven't integrated it. But if I can say, like I do, look at that periodic table. That periodic table is a design. And that's why I take them through the 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, how the electrons flow through it, how you create elements from that, okay? That's the reason I do it. I say design. Whenever we see design, we can look for a creator. It's not random process. It's not chance. There's a creator involved there. As I said, my chemistry part is limited and my physics part is limited, but I'm going to use that as an example here in just a minute. All right, anybody else want to chime in on integrating science and with Scripture?
Well, I go back to your reason number 3.
Yes.
In the antagonism to science, it doesn't necessarily all work on evolution. I know that you biology guys will perhaps root cause.
Yeah.
But the reality is that a lot of times it's chemistry, not chemistry, but it's the way Christians just matter of fact dogmatically say without listening, and it causes people who may be open to things to turn and walk away.
Yeah.
And so they may be drawn, and they may be being drawn by the Spirit to something, to come to know. And all of a sudden they get hit with, in a matter of fact, well, if you can't believe this, then you can't believe anything. And actually Christians push them away. And that's fundamentally wrong and flawed.
That's exactly right. And by the way, this is where the church has failed. The church failed me, and the church has been continually failing because the church has not supplied it an answer. Supplied an answer, okay? The church has not supplied an answer. Is there any evidence for God's miraculous creation versus random chance producing life? And the answer to that question, there are tons of evidences for that particular aspect. But if we don't teach it in the church, and since 97% of the parents that go to church send their kids to public school, where are they going to get it if not the church? Okay? So, yes, dogmatism is used. This is the church dogma. We do not believe in evolution. Man did not come from an ape. We believe God created. That's dogma. But the evidence from science, and that's where we have a part, okay? Even though it's a small part, and I think the battle may be lost culturally, but we do have an opportunity in our classrooms to change it around. Anybody else have a comment?
Well, just that idea, I mean, I don't know you're saying this, but I mean, I start my first class, reading this from Romans. But then also that, the first message they get in college if you're in science is you can't be, just like you said, you can't be you're an idiot, right? If you're a Christian and a scientist, And I just think that it's important for them to see quickly that that's not, that sentence in itself is such a lie, you know what I mean? And just, really the basis of science, a lot of the science comes from scientists that were Christians, and I don't know, I don't think they even understand that can be that. That's a history.
Because if we don't give them the answers, the scientific answers,
Right.
then I'm going to give an example from physics here in a bit. Yeah, I know
It's okay.
I'm going to get shot. But I've already done chemistry, so I need to go to physics next.
How do you deal, though, with the situation? So, you brought up evolution. So, we can say there are quite a few, and I would say quite a few is probably a reason, however I define it, how you want to define it, but there's a number of people who are theological evolution in some way or another.
Can you hold that just a second? Because I am going to talk about the 4 different paradigms, okay?
Right.
Which we're going to get to that. So scaffolding, instructional scaffolding, creating structures. Our kids come to us confused. Their parents are confused. They haven't been taught this unless they've been taught it at Trinity, okay? So basically, I see it all the time, that type of level of confusion. First thing I do is teach them about worldviews. That's one of our first lessons, usually on the first day. And the way I do that, I have listed here 4 of the worldviews, and I tell them on a piece of paper, I want you using only a circle and an arrow, draw the 4 worldviews. That gets them to thinking, and they come up with some really good answers. Theism, God's not part of creation, okay? Or deism, God's not part of creation, doesn't interact. So I get different types of things on that. And we can talk about it, which is best, which is good, which is not doing what we want to do as far as the definition. Polytheism. But one of the key ones down here is materialism. Materialism is the worldview of our culture. There is no God or spirit beings, only matter and energy. That's it. That's what you're taught at Tech. That's what you're taught at Coronado. That's what you're taught at any school, is that worldview. Okay, that's it. So, I'm going to come back to those here in a second.
And some Christian universities.
Yeah, like Whalen.
I'm thinking ACU.
Yeah.
So when this
Yes.
recording goes live,
Yeah, but who's gonna see this? Recording.
Sure. I will really be retired. Truly retired.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about science paradigms. The first one, scientific biblical creationism. Basically, God created in everything in creation in 6 days. On the 7th day, He rested. And death came as a result of Adam's sin, not as a result of Christ creating. The next one on the next page, page 2, is, I'll let you read through the points of it. By the way, scientific creationism is also called young earth creationism, because they take the untenable position in our culture of saying that the earth is 10,000 years old or less. The next one is progressive creationism. Progressive creationism was started in the 1800s by a well-known theologian by the name of Chalmers. Chalmers started the Scottish Revival, and basically Darwin had already had his say, and people were trying to take the concept of old age, which the geologists were talking about. It wasn't as old as we talk about now, but they were talking about old age. And how do you handle that with Scripture? So this was the first attempt. The first attempt was not to refute geology, but it was to accommodate geology. And that's where we've been the whole time in church history. How do we accommodate what the scientists tell us? All right, so basically the gap theory, Schofield in the Schofield Bible took this, said that there was a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. And during that time, Satan was created, came to earth, destroyed the earth, and that's why we have dinosaur fossils, because God then destroyed the earth with a flood. And Genesis 1:2 is a second creation. So you'll find Christians that adhere to that rather strongly. More recently is the day-age theory, or is taught in the liberal seminaries, called the framework hypothesis. Basically, the day-age theory is each day represents millions or billions of years. And a guy by the name of Schroeder started it, but Hugh Ross has been one of them that have proclaimed that since then in his Reasons to Believe website and ministry. The next one and the last one is Neo-Darwinianism. This is simply saying that matter and energy, Neo-Darwinianism, matter and energy create life. And we'll talk about the four big ideas of evolution that AP Biology tells us to teach here in a minute. So let's talk about the worldviews. I do a survey with the kids where I have different statements that correspond to one or more worldviews. And I have them take it, and then I have them, now I'm having them give it to a friend because it causes less hassle than I said. Used to say give it to your parents, but I would always get these long apologist notes, I should say, not apologetic notes, apologist notes of why a certain question shouldn't be there. The whole idea is to give a bunch of different ideas. This year, we took the average. We did a Likert scale survey. We did an average. And biblical creationism had an average of 4.2. Theistic evolution had an average of 1.8. And progressive creationism, 2.5. And theistic evolution, about 2.4. So 4 being that it was more popular, more agreement going down the line. So you'll see that we have a mixture among our kids as to what they believe and whatnot. By the way, I do that because then my AP has to do a chi-square analysis to see if it's statistically valid, which is also part of the AP exam. All right. So theistic evolution is what you were talking about earlier when I asked you to stop. Theistic evolution simply says that God used evolution to create. Okay. Now, theistic evolution, if we were to give these a worldview, biblical scientific creationism would be what worldview? The four worldviews: theism, deism, polytheism, materialism. What would you say?
Say again, sorry.
Theism. Theism, scientific creationism. God interacts with his creation. Okay? Main difference. Progressive creationism. God interacts at different times in history. That's also theism. Okay, so both of those are theism. Evolution, on the other hand, theistic evolution, if you read the authors that say they believe that God started it, but he, from the Big Bang, usually is where they go back to, from the Big Bang forward, God really doesn't interfere. Yeah, he sent Christ, but as far as how the world unravels and all that kind of stuff, theistic evolution is basically deism. And then, of course, Neo-Darwinianism. strictly materialism. You
Well,
would
there are
disagree?
quite a few scientists, Christian scientists, like, who are thinking, and I would classify them as theistic evolution, that it's not a one-time touch by God. God's involved in the entire process.
Yeah, when you look at those,
Guiding the process.
right, like sending Christ, you know, to save man and that type of stuff. But it's still, evolution is the process by which God created life, right?
No, I'm thinking in every evolutionary process and things like that, he is involved in it. It's not a random
Yeah,
chance sort of thing.
that's an accommodation thing again. I mean, you say it's not random, but yet, let me put it this way.
I'm
If
thinking
any one of
Francis
those.
Collins and Biologos.
Right, I've read his book. That's, matter of fact, what I used to come up with this. Collins is a good example. Collins will say that God attends it all, but we don't see it. Because evolution, by definition, has to be random processes. Okay? So
Okay,
Collins will
from
say.
that standpoint, he's saying it's not evolution then, if it's random process.
No, I'm saying that is evolution.
He
Evolution
would
is.
say that then.
Oh, you're saying not theistic evolution.
Is that it wouldn't be evolution.
But he says the same process that the evolutionists say, the Darwinians say, is the process by which it happens. And what is the theology behind that? Let's talk about theology. When did death occur?
You brought that up to me before.
When did it occur?
What is death? How do you define death?
That's where we have to go.
Is
now
it
we have
separation, or is it
Or both.
death? I mean, dead as
physical.
in
Is it both? Right? There's three options. It is separation from God, spiritual death, physical death, or both. I do both, okay? That's where I'm at. Because if you do not add physical death to it, and God says he comes to the point where Adam sins and brings death into the world, and the whole world groans, that's Romans 12:5, or 5:12, one of the two. Okay? Then we have a theological difference, right? Now we've taken a literal concept of death that has always been understood to be physical death, with Adam's death, okay? That he brought both physical and spiritual, and now we've accommodated a new definition where death is no longer part of sin. Death is just spiritual reality. So therefore, we now have a theological issue that we have to deal with and accommodate. So whenever you get from the historical literal hermeneutic, that's how you translate, you start having to accommodate. Now, I don't demean any of those opinions because I enjoy arguing theologically where they take us, okay, which I've been having to do for years. But because of time, let's go on to the next one, page 3. Identify evolution's big ideas. This is what is being taught at Texas Tech and every high school because it's part of the curriculum, text curriculum. All right. Big idea number 1, matter is self-organizing. Emergent properties of the elements are capable of producing living organisms. Whether you're a theistic evolutionist, that's what you're going to teach. That's what Collins teaches. Right there. Matter is self-organizing. In other words, the elements have been created to come together. Do we have an example of that? Chemistry, you have it all the time. Here's an example of emergent properties of silicon and oxygen. Nice structure, order, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, this is my lunch. We haven't gotten to this with the class yet. So, emergent properties can produce this, but can emergent properties produce that? see there's a big difference, some big leaps that we have to make for emergent properties. So matter is self-organizing. The evolutionists say that, yes, this is an example, and this is an example of matter self-organizing. Right? Anyone want to take this home?
No. The reason we don't keep thought with you, right?
Yes.
Hungry cat.
I'm not
You want to have a hungry
"Oh,
cat?
so cute."
Okay.
Is that snake food?
This case, no. Some parent will hate me by the end of this lecture when not this one, but when I do this demonstration for the class, because I'll give a chance to take it home.
Mhm.
All right, big idea. Yeah, expect the complaints. Okay. All right, big idea number 2. Biological environmental processes work to produce new species from a population, such as microevolution, a wolf to dog. Also capable of producing a species from a single ancestor. That's microevolution, amoeba to man. So basically we're saying that the same biological and environmental processes are at work to do that. There's not a difference between a microevolution and macroevolution. Macroevolution is just a lot of microevolution happening over millions of years. Big idea number 3, humans evolved from animals, part of evolution's tree of life. I think we're all familiar with that one. Big idea number 4, the earth has no special place or significance in the universe, also known as the anthropomorphic principle. Therefore, life evolving on other planets is rare, not rare, but to be expected. Okay, then lastly I have intelligent design there, and I have 2 things, empirical science and forensic science. One of the things I stress to the students is that I will show them evidence that will show creation to be a superior model to evolution. It's like, talk about forensics like Mrs. Kitten teaches. You collect evidence. You don't go and perform an experiment, empirical method, okay? You don't do an experiment killing a person in a room to see if he gives the same blood spatter, okay? You have experiments, but you are collecting evidence, DNA evidence, blood evidence. The same thing for creation and evolution. They are paradigms, they are belief systems. So we need to collect evidence. What is the evidence? Where does the evidence take us? Where does it lead us? And the one that I chose to demonstrate, and then we can talk about more of them, is the story of dark matter. If we take a point of gravity, center of gravity rather, like the sun, that exerts gravitational effects on the planets, we find the planet's speed follows this type of curve, which follows Newton's law of gravity, okay? So you have this going down here. 1970s, I think it was 1977, so I'll put it up here. Vera Rubin, Dr. Rubin, while everyone else was looking at black holes, she wanted to be different. So she started looking at the Andromeda Galaxy. The Andromeda Galaxy is similar to our galaxy. And she went from the center where sorry,
It's a tally.
3 tallies and I'll lose my phone, which for me is not a bad idea.
Please take it.
All right, so let's say that this is a black hole in a galaxy, right? We've moved from our solar system to a galaxy. And you go from the black hole, well, here's what she found. She found that the speed of the stars in the orbit was the same as the ones toward the center. Now, if you want to do a mental analogy, if you take a drill and put it in a bowl of milk with a bunch of what could be some round cereal?
Cheerios.
Cheerios or Pop Tarts or something, whatever. Okay, put it in there.
Cocoa Puffs.
And you start the drill. What's going to happen to the Cocoa Puffs? They're going to eventually be at the edge of the bowl, right? And the ones toward the middle, toward the drill, will start spinning faster than the ones at the end. Well, that's this picture here. This picture here is like, if you ever seen ice skaters doing this deal where they start going in a circle and then the other ice skaters catch and it's getting harder and have to go faster to catch up and whatnot and the speed. Well, this is this area up here. No changes in the speed. So she had two choices to make. Dr. Rubin could have said the second law, or not second law, Newton's law of gravity, back to thermodynamics, doesn't apply at the cosmic level. Or there's another source of gravity. And she called that source of gravity, and everyone else has since then, dark matter. If you look up a definition of dark matter, you'll find out astrophysicists like Perlmutter, for example, will say, I can't tell you what it is, I can tell you what it isn't. In other words, they're saying there must be some gravity that's holding these stars to keep them from slinging out of the universe or the galaxy. But we don't know what it is, but we know it's there because we see the effect. Think about that a minute. We have so ingrained the materialistic mentality into our culture that we can say, awe, instead of immediately saying, is this an evidence of God? What does Colossians 1:17 say about Jesus Christ? He is before all things. He is the head of all things, and in him, what? All things hold together. We have an evidence. But yet we talk about dark matter. Dark matter cannot be seen. Dark matter cannot be detected. Dark matter is something that's out there. And we are willing to teach that. I tell the kids it's very much like Paul when he went to talk to the Athenians on Mars Hill, and he found an altar to the what? Unknown God. Well, here's our unknown God. But this isn't just our unknown God anymore. We also have two unknown gods. The other one is dark energy. Because there's not enough matter in the universe for the Big Bang. Back to another issue. There's not enough energy in the universe for the Big Bang. So to make the equations work, we invent dark matter and dark energy. Dark energy is energy we cannot see, detect, or anything, but we know it has to be there because of our equations. Big Bang cannot occur without it. And by the way, every time we find more galaxies, we have to change the equations. And the equations mean we have to have more dark matter and dark energy. This is where we can integrate Scripture into science. I do it with DNA. One of the things I have them do, DNA, the randomness of DNA. Remember the story that evolutionists use? I think they're getting away from it now. But the random monkeys, you know, an infinite monkey theorem. You have an infinite number of monkeys typing on typewriters that they'll produce the complete works of Shakespeare. You heard that? Okay, so this is what I do with the kids. I have them go out and I said, I need 3 monkeys. So I have 3 kids come up, okay? And I tell them to put, using the alphabet, you know, just some letters. That's E, C, E. And then in that, I want them to write one word, Romeo. Let me do it this way. That's spelled Romeo. R-O-M-E-O. Is that right? R-I-A.
R-O-M-E-O.
R-O-M-E-O?
I think so.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, and then some more letters. And then I have another one do it. Different set of letters, but then they have Romeo. And then another set of letters, wherefore, okay? Romeo, Romeo, wherefore. And then I go back and I say, what is the probability, if you have an R here, of having it followed by an O? How many letters in the alphabet? 26. Have that followed by an M, what is the probability? Have it by an E. So one of the problems is with having words that mean something. DNA is information molecule. The arrangement of the letters means something. And I've taught them this by that time. So we end up with a situation where we have a high degree of improbability of producing information. Improbability. It's not probable. But the second problem with that is we cannot capture the information. So if the information is produced randomly, we cannot capture it. So those are the two problems with the infinite monkey theorem. And it's the problem, core problem, with RNA world or these different things that we come up with to say that we can produce an information molecule from a random process. Those two are the key death knell to that. The probability of getting a string here that makes sense, and then second problem is capturing that string that makes sense to a usable thing that we can use. Okay, I'm through. Anybody have a comment, question?
Well, just to confirm this, I know you guys know this, but you know, I just had to orally read the PSAT that we gave to 8th and 9th graders. Orally read it. One article was on the development of bacteria in the Bahamas in blue holes that doesn't need oxygen, therefore pretty much proving that obviously we're going to find water on other planets and all that. And yeah, so I had to go through all of that. And then the other article was the development of the lemur, that he seems to be the missing link between, as you know, man and ape. And literally it was read to them like, this is how it is.
Yep. I had an AP student come up to me a couple of weeks ago, and came from a different school, doing his senior year here, and he said, you know, chickens came from dinosaurs. I said, no, they didn't. He said, my teacher at such and such school said they did. Your teacher's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a video in the class where they took cells from a lizard and implanted it in a chicken, and the chicken had scaly skin, proving that it did.
Mm-hmm.
So I took those two questions and put it on the last exam, because I have a section, which we've already talked about, which I didn't talk about here, called logic errors. The first logic error is, my teacher told me, is called appeal to authority, logic error. Ad veracundium, I'll give them some Latin too. The second one is, the way I stated the question is, and this is true, they've taken genes from a jellyfish that glow in the dark and implanted it in a pig, so the pig glows green. Therefore, that proves the pig evolved from a jellyfish, which was the second point. What he was talking about with the chicken and lizard thing was genetic engineering, and we do that all the time. Okay, but a pig didn't evolve from a jellyfish any more than a chicken evolved from a dinosaur. Okay, so those are the things that, just like you were saying, they're saying it is fact,
Right.
but in that particular case, it's a false cause, one cause that you didn't prove, which is just to show off that I did learn some Latin. It's post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after this comes this, in which case it doesn't. Okay, so so I teach them logic. I have about 8 logic arguments
They need to learn
that I
logic.
show them, you know, where they can start detecting this stuff.
Yeah.
and not just taking it as propaganda. We got a job. There's just 3 of us to do it, 4 of us to do it.
5, Michelle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In college, well, because, I went to LCU and I had, Dr. Kirk Martin over at LCU, and he was a phenomenal teacher about bringing in everything, evolution, in a way that, like, he had a whole class day dedicated to evolution, and it's just like, well, this is what it says, but really, does that make sense? Let's break this down and let's make sense of it. And one of the books he had us read was Genetic Entropy, The Mystery of the Genome by Dr. J.C. Sanford. I don't know if y'all read that, but in the book, it talks about how he keeps referencing, how he has a red wagon, and he's gonna leave the red wagon sitting out there, but it doesn't matter how, and like, the theory of evolution says that red wagon will someday become a rocket. And it's just like, but really, does that really make sense? Like, how can we engineer, how can that, without a creator, how can that wagon be a rocket? And he references that the whole time, along with all
Yeah,
this stuff,
it's
and I
the
just think that did a great job of
Same argument as this.
reiterating, that.
Can
So.
the emergent properties that produce this produce blank?
Well, even like the
Without an
second law of
information
thermo,
molecule.
I mean, like, where do they get that, second law of thermo? A little bit with me, I know, but I mean, just.
Well, we talk about, in biology, the first and second laws are the big ones.
Yeah.
That matter, the energy changes from one form to another.
Right.
So we talk about that starting with the sun down to, through photosynthesis, and then how it goes through the ecosystem. And then the other one is, energy goes from order to disorder, or increasing entropy. And, matter of fact, I tell them that between, the ages of birth to, between 25 and 30, they are decreasing entropy, that they are building, but after 25 or 30, you start dying, okay? Fortunately, it starts out slow, but
That's
my
my
age is
favorite
speeding
lecture
up,
you get.
every day is a little bit faster.
I am now dying. I've reached the age of dying.
I love watching him tell them that.
Downhill.
I think our time is up. Any other comments, questions? Thank you for your participation.
Unrelated comment, but then you guys probably know, but we've got my construction on the new little system experiment that Michelle's put together. And I was just thinking, you guys, there's probably some cool chemistry things you have to do, looking at nitrogen cycles,
Found a kit.
carbon cycles.
It's up in the cabinet.
We can do it chemistry.
Yes.
What do you want?
We're done.
Anybody want some,
So.
anybody want some Diet Coke? Don't wanna know where it came
That
from.
sounds terrible.
It's the first one to take it. It's gonna leave it on somebody's desk.
Dr. Unfred, do you ever
Oh,
talk
no,
about
it's- you know
Mrs.
what? I
Lock?
haven't signed in on any book.
Just even to,
This
You
is
need to
brilliant
go
mind.
to, I need to go to Michelle to sign in. Kara said she signed me in errors because she didn't
It
have.
does, they're trying to,
Kayla didn't
they're
have
actually
hers
two
out.
areas. They're
Why
trying to
did she
explain
want-
the.
Oh, my mom,
Yes.
because
So
my
they're-
mom
Michelle's
was
still in
the
her
one
room, or-
from Adrian,
Michigan.
With her, some
Yes,
of
yes,
No,
yes.
And that, which I have never gotten
Might still be
into,
there.
but I think it's.
But it's the same
So-
idea, right?
Things
Do we
the
turn
same
this
idea.
off?
Okay.